Thank you very much. I was speaking to somebody earlier, and he said, he didn't know me, but he came up to me and he said, are you Sarah Weir of the Design Council? And I said, yeah, I am. He said, oh, it's a real shame you're in the graveyard slot at the end of the day. But I wanted to hear what you say, are they going to stream it? So I hope this won't be the graveyard slot. I think we should go out with a bang, go away with something in our minds to inspire, to provoke, and hopefully I'll give you something to think about. So looking ahead, I think it's sometimes useful to look back. And I think it's particularly useful in the DNA of the Design Council because it was set up in 1944. Second World War hadn't come to an end, and Churchill's War Cabinet was feeling nervous about the rest of the world rushing off in this new world. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Industrial design was all going to change, and they were slightly sort of panicked. We better set something up before the rest of the world takes all the business and we are left alone. And I think, doesn't matter what you think about Brexit, it's interesting how the past really informs the future. And here they all were, sitting around their table, smoking cigarettes and pipes, these guys, not really able to imagine this new world, because it was going to change hugely. In fact, I think that photograph, it probably isn't 1944, although it's captioned as such, without being too pedantic about it. That wall, that curtain material, is, I think, 1950s. And I suspect that picture is probably around the time of the Festival of Britain, which was 1951, which is at a time when Britain really showed itself incredibly differently. The clock also is probably not 1944. But there they all are, sitting around, thinking, what do? We don't quite understand what this world is going to be. And then Clement Attlee's government came in 1945, Labour government, and took things forward. So the Design Council's always had that in its DNA, and I like that, because it means you're never quite certain. You're not certain what's going to happen, and that's not a bad place to be. So this is where we started. There were two bits to it, actually. So the Fine Art Commission started in 1924, earlier than the Design Council, and then the Council for Industrial Design, the one I just mentioned. Then that became the Design Council, became a charity. In 1999, you might know him, some of you, that's Lord Rogers, and that was the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment. Became an independent charity in 2011, and then there's me. So just one other small fact, they're all men. It's a very male world, actually. And interestingly, even now, it's quite a male world. I'll talk about that in a sec. But so that was the past. And what do we do now? Well, our life is to make life better by design. That's our purpose. That's what we're here to do. We're an independent charity, partly funded by government and partly funded from a different variety of sources. And we think about things in four ways, really. So better places is clearly where we live, making sure that we're not just thinking about houses, but houses in the environment of what sits around those houses, the context, the roads, the transportation system, and jobs. Processes is everything from how do you design a contract? How do you design a procurement? How do you think about, actually all the processes, I was thinking with the previous speaker about the processes of how all those things move around the different factories. Better products, and that's something, we have a program called Spark, which I'll show you in a second, things that can make life better. And better performance is probably all those four together. If we get things right, if we really design them well, we can perform better. So as an independent charity, we're therefore quite an impartial champion, and that's important when we're working with clients like, say, Highways England, Network Rail, people like that. They need somebody that's going to have that independent voice. And we facilitate partnerships between different people, and we talk about design. So how do we do this? In three ways. This is quite funny. What was your CFC? Is that guy gone now? They were customer facility centre. There we've got CFC, but not quite the same as your CFC. So committed to making people's lives better, focused on doing it well, actually the same point as you, and working in partnership with other people. And we do that in two different ways. So the first, and this is the bit that we're funded by government to do, is to do national research. And this is really important for that sort of post-Brexit world. And we take the insights from that research and then do a series of programs. We started doing the research way back, 2005, but it was only in 20 10 that we actually looked at the whole design economy and found that that was worth £71 billion. So that would be everybody from civil engineers, architects, town planners here, clothing and fashion at the top, digital, game designers, software, product and industrial. So quite a wide range of people. And there were two things to that. So it connects money and people. The money is 71 billion, and it also found that people using design are 41% more productive. So that was a nice backdrop. And then just a couple of months ago, we brought out this research, and this is very important for the future. The first time ever, we've looked at what is the value of the design skills. So those skills are head, heart, hand. And they'll be used by a lot of people that, again, the previous speaker was talking about. So the head is being able to visualize or conceptualize something that is in front of you. The heart is being able to understand the person who has the challenge, the issue that needs solving, and really get to that by asking the right questions. And then the hand is, well, it could be anything from CAD drawing to actual drawing to computer simulation, whatever it happens to be. And this research showed us that those skills are worth £209 billion to the economy. Now, I can't actually turn that into football pitches, but I can tell you that that is more than we spend on the on healthcare in this country, which according to the ONS was 185 billion in 2015. So it's worth a lot of money to the economy, and that is everybody across design. So that, you could be working in Barclays doing internet banking, you could be a shop fitter, you could be designing a pixel, you could be working at CERN, you could be designing a transport system. We also found that those industries that use design are more productive. So they're £10 per hour more productive. It's 2.5 million people that have these skills. So that's great, that's 1 in 12 people, but you may not be surprised to hear, and all of this is important for post-Brexit, that they're mainly in London and the South East. So the point I keep thinking about this is, okay, so if those 2.5 million people could be 5 million people, and they could be spread much more widely across the country, personal potential is increased hugely, productivity of the country, economic productivity goes up, and therefore the world stage that we're on, we can be playing in a different way. We also have an issue because there is already a skills shortage and a gap in those design skills, and it's already costing us 5.6 billion. So that's now. This research was done just a few months ago. And the other thing, which again, I was talking to somebody earlier, and he said, "Are you going to say something about design and technology?" He said, "It's just dropping in schools, it's disappearing." I said, "Yep, I know. So we have the numbers, we have the evidence. But it's not just about it dropping and how important that is. It's also about thinking about how it's taught. So teaching the teachers in a different way, because it's changing so enormously. So the numbers have gone down, as you can see there, 424,000, that was in 2000, and now it's 165,000. And about 50% of schools have closed their design and technology departments. And I think one of these things, the discussion about STEM and STEAM, maybe some of you have heard that, and I just think that's not the right discussion, because if you put design just into the A of art, where is the person working in Barclays doing internet banking? Where are some of the people that you are probably employing in your business in Ocado? I don't think they're going to come into A of art. Some will, but some won't. And for me, it's actually about threading design through STEM, through science, through technology, through engineering, and through maths. That's what I think we need to do much more strongly. So we have a series of programs. So these are not funded by the government. These are things where we get funding from different places. So they're all about the places, products, processes, and performance. And I'll briefly talk about each one. So the first one is Better Places. This is about where we live, and we've worked across the country. This is the Olympic Park. Some of you might recognize it. I worked on the park, actually, for 7 years, about integrating all the arts and culture with design, engineering, construction. So I saw firsthand that sort of weaving of different things together and how people coming from incredibly different angles on things can create something much more interesting than they might have done on their own. This is the Olympic Park at night. I think actually the thing about the Olympic Park is that it's only now really that you can see whether it's beginning to work. And somebody got in touch with me the other day and said there was some work actually done by the Design Council and it wasn't published. It was from, I think, 2012. Did we want to publish it? And my first thought was, oh, do we want to talk about the Olympic Park still 5 years on? And then actually I read it, and it was all about the design and whether it has really integrated and whether you have a healthy place to live. So you could live there, you can work there, you can walk, your child can go to school there. And I thought, actually, you know, it is that, and we need to be seeing that and then seeing how those sort of things, maybe not quite on that scale, can be used, replicated around the rest of the country. So we have just published it for anybody that's interested. And we work around the country providing design advice and reviews all over the place. We work with about 500 different design experts. So we'll bring them in on projects, depending on what the project is, to provide their expertise. And in terms of the healthy living, and these, I'm sorry, these 3 slides are all London. They're not just London ones. It's just there's a particular focus in London of ensuring that some of the buildings, they can be dense, but actually having green space and ensuring you can get to the bus or to the tube or to some sort of public transport. 87% of dwellings that we're building are more than 10 minutes away from public transport. And once you do that, people feel they need to buy a car. Well, that may be okay if you have a car or you can afford to buy a car, you're able to drive a car, but what happens if you're not? Then you're stuck. And I think that's the thing that we really need to shift, and there's been a big national policy framework which has just been relaunched by Theresa May. We've been very involved in it, and we're involved in the consultation for that, because AI and all of those sort of tools are incredibly important in things like planning. They're going to totally change the way that we do these things. So technology comes into absolutely everything that I'm talking about. We also work with, so this is actually on planning. Again, that's paper at the moment, but you know, these things are going to be done extraordinarily differently. They already can be, and they will be continuously in the future. The next one is Design Academy. So this is about processes and performance. So this is students at university, could be here at Warwick, you're doing computer engineering, you're doing landscape designing, you're doing business studies. And the university pays for this, so students come forward, 15 of them, and they work together on a real challenge, and the challenge at the moment is aging well. And some of them aren't necessarily all that keen on doing it at the beginning, they're not sure what the value might be, but then when they see how they can work together, this is because employers said to us, people come out knowing their skill really well, so computer engineering, they know it, or chemical engineering, they know that really well. Landscape they design, they know that really well, but it's those crossing capabilities which mean you're very flexible as an employee that are needed. And so people do that and then they come out and it makes them more able to get a good job. We've worked with 350 undergraduates right across the country, and as I said, the challenge is a real one. It's not just a conceptual challenge, and I think that's incredibly important. The other thing that's important, this is again for the future and thinking about all sorts of technology, is healthcare. So we do a huge amount of work in this area, and again, I talked to someone earlier who is seconded into let me think, was it a comment or is doing a placement into the NHS, actually on technology and design. So we worked with, this was thinking about A&E. Often you're in A&E and you're quite anxious because you don't know what's going on and the times you're waiting might be very long. And actually, one of the things that was realized is that if you just made the signage and the graphics much better, and this came about through working with lots and lots of people, it makes you less anxious. I was showing this to somebody the other day, and he said, oh my goodness, I was really ill on Boxing Day. And do you know, the one thing I remember as my eyes were swimming around a bit, he said, I remember seeing that sign on the wall, all those signs on the wall. I said, well, hopefully that meant that your relatives weren't quite as anxious about you as they might have been if they didn't quite know what was happening. So we do a lot of work in the public sector for public services. So this would be with local authorities right across the country. Again, really important looking into the future. You haven't necessarily got money to solve problems. And it isn't always money that solves problems. Of course you need money, but sometimes it's about just how you might think a bit differently about the problem. So we work with teams right across the country. I have a big contract with the local government association, and we help them re-see how they might deal with their challenges rather differently. And then again, with the previous speaker, I was interested in, you're using AI in such a huge way. This is a slightly smaller scale project, but because we do a lot of work on prevention and public health, this is the Whittington Hospital, but this is something which could be taken up in hospitals right across the country. You go to collect your drugs at the pharmacy. This is often a bit, a little bit chaotic, or theirs was chaotic, because lots and lots and lots of people go to it. So what they wanted to do was make it less chaotic and clearer to people to understand what was happening. Send different messages to people that it isn't just always about taking a drug. And lastly, be able to run the thing more clearly and actually be able to sell people things in the pharmacy. So after a period of time working with people, quite a tiny little AI project really, the robot goes off and gets your drug, and they put these in just so people can see the drug coming down the aisle, and they quite like that. But they turn themselves into a CIC, community interest company. They don't have to pay VAT anymore. It saves 20%. That saves the NHS. That might seem like a small thing, but imagine if that was in every pharmacy across the country. That makes a big difference. Spark, lastly, these are products. So this is about making life better. These two guys here were originally scientists, and while working out how you take urea out of straw to make MDF, to take the pee from the cows, they realized this green glue they were using when mixed with coffee grounds made a really solid material. And from that, they made a coffee cup. So that's in production at the moment. So all of the products that we work with, about 13 ventures a year, come up with great ideas. I spoke about this actually earlier today, and I said to everybody, and I say to all of you now, if any of you have got a great idea, you don't have to be a designer at all. Look on our website, you can apply, come forward, and we look forward to hearing from you. Then we do a huge project in the southwest of England called Transform Aging. So we know the issues of aging, technology is going to play a massive role here, and this is getting people in later life, designers, engineers, social entrepreneurs all together to find different solutions. So those are the things that we do in the day-to-day as a bit of background, and actually we also look out into Europe, and we will continue to do so. I was in Copenhagen yesterday with the chief execs of the Norway, Singapore, and Denmark design councils, and there are similar issues with AI, with technology, with looking into the future, and it's really important that we all keep talking to each other. So, into the future. There is a little bit of big context. Our economy has been flat for the last 10 years, you'll know that. This is a time when we're going into a massive housing development challenge. That is a huge challenge when we've got a workforce changing in construction, when you're thinking, okay, how is all the money actually going to work to make all of this housing, and how do we ensure that the quality is there? People who are using design skills are 47% more productive. We found that from our research. But areas that don't use design skills as much are 29% less productive. And a lot of those are actually, there are some in retail, in admin, in hospitality, where about 1 in 4 people in the country are already employed. There is a lack of diversity across the design economy. When I first started this job about 10 months ago, I found this quite hilarious advert from an old magazine called Design. So this is 1965, so it talks about a job for a man, that the man's going to be between 30 and 40, but if he's particularly exceptional, he could apply and he needs to ring Miss Sandwell, blah, 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 blah. So 1965. 50 years on, 2015, 78% of people working in the design economy are male, compared to 53% across the general economy. In terms of BEAME, 11% is about 11.7 is about the same, but there are some really big, stark differences. That 19% figure is those working in digital design, so much more mixed in terms of cultural diversity. 6% is only 6% of architects are not white. And 4 is only 4% of graphic designers are not white. This is from 2015. Now, as far as I know, more than 6% of people who live in houses are not white. Then the numbers underneath are to do with age. So 63% are under 45 compared to 67 across the whole economy. But the one at the bottom, those in digital design, so a lot of people here today working on projects are much younger. So 72% of them are under 44. But there's also an inequality in the design of public services across the country. We know that, we can see that, but it's something that we really need to focus on. And looking into the future, the sort of creative design skills, and when I say design, I mean design and tech and design and engineering, are going to be even more important. As the algorithmic work comes in, as AI comes in, it actually sort of frees us up as human beings to use our brains in a rather different way. But we need to be sure we can all talk to each other. Who's the robot and who's the person? We're speaking different languages. Do we actually understand what anyone's saying to each other? And the reason that's so important is many of you have possibly seen these slides, which is the work that the World Economic Forum did about Fourth Industrial Revolution that we're in now. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity up at the top, all important. Things that you're probably using every day in your work. So how do we fill in those gaps? We've definitely got to be thinking about the design and. Design never sits on its own, and we've really got to listen out for the changes that are happening. Design and education, design and innovation, design and process, design and R&D, design and technology. They're all changing and shifting. There's the new report, the annual report that John Almeida does, has just come out, the annual Design and Tech report, and he's talking about AI and machine learning being the top 10 trends, but also in terms of skills, the adaptability to change and technology have come out as really important. Another quite interesting fact I found, this just came out yesterday actually, Google, Microsoft, Airbnb, Dropbox and Amazon are employing 65% more designers than they were a year ago. His work is all the US, so it's US skew, but it's still I think, incredibly interesting. And the other thing about this design and is this point about, there's a point about unconscious bias, about building in. If you don't have a diversity of workforce, you can build in unconscious bias into the design of the coding. So who's designing the coding and how is that being done? And I think that's quite a big issue. So I think back to threading design through STEM. I think this is really key because so many things that I've heard today, some people talked about the word design and some people didn't, it's this integration and how design is going to be done really differently, how you're going to learn really differently, and the impact it's going to have. So to join up the dots and end, I think education, we need to think about that differently, particularly that sort of design and technology education, how learning is going to be done. Talent and skills post-Brexit are definitely going to shift. There's no question about it. And so it's not just about the talent under our noses, but it's about people going and working overseas, and how do we get different people to be coming here. I've been talking to several designers recently who say that all their work is outside the UK now, that they're not really working in the UK at all. Quality and equality. If we keep the standards up, how do we ensure that the standards are for everybody, and some people don't just get left behind? Ethics and principles. This is something which I think that's the point I was making about who's designing the coding and all the AI issues. Who's looking at that? Who's writing the contracts? Who's ensuring that we're thinking about the longer-term possibilities of what's going to happen? Good design is for the long term, actually. And I think although we like things that can come and go and you've got a bit of a throwaway society, I think there's a bit of a shift in that. So longevity, I think, is important, and then waste. There's a big issue at the moment, well, not at the moment, it's been there for ages, about plastic, single-use plastic, et cetera, et cetera. we've got to do something about it. We can't just keep talking about it, but we need policy and we need money also to work on that. And then I think if you're at university here now, you're probably going to be working till you're 70. So you might need to change your career 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. And there is a sort of long-term, lifelong learning strategy. But to my mind, it doesn't clearly enough have design in there. Design is problem solving, not just design as something nice to look at, but design in actually making things better. So my takeaway, design solves problems. It isn't just the, slightly fluffy, nice to have. You can't have a transport system. You can't build a train. You can't put a bridge across a river. You can't have a pixel. You can't have a wind farm without design. You can't have any of those things without design. And design's for people. That's where it starts. It's not just a concept. It is for somebody, and it has to solve a problem for somebody. And it's a fundamental creator of value. It makes money for us. And in this different world we're going to be in, that could not be more important. We're the 5th biggest design economy in the world at the moment, but we're sort of going slightly backwards and others are snapping at our heels. So we got all this great creative talent. Much of it's in this room and has been here today, but we need to keep pushing that forward rather than it disappearing backwards. So I think we need to be much more serious about what design is, but design for personal potential for that person at the bottom, and design for economic benefit. The future is there, and it is our future. It's all of our future. So let's design it. Thank you.